This is the good, the bad, and the wrestling, a Tony James podcast. A Tony James podcast. That's right, GBW. We're here. We're back. We're into season 2. And guess what? That's right. The bells of justice are always ringing. Hey, we got through season 1, 30 plus episodes. We started in February. It is February now. So what? No better time than the present than to start season 2. I'm about quality over quantity. So there's some things I'd like to talk about today, but before I do, I want to welcome everybody back. I want to thank all my 300 plus followers, listeners, and subscribers. We're on Spotify, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and that's where we're messing around. And so I want to thank everybody for the time and effort into taking a listen. We are all pro wrestling fans at the end. We may agree to disagree. We may not like what we talk about. But at the end of the day, there is one thing in common, and that is pro wrestling. So with that being said, what I'd like to do first, I want to thank my sponsors. As always, Sinbad's Gym for keeping me in my gear, for Jose Sanchez Boots right out of El Paso, Texas. Check these guys out. You have to check these guys out. Great quality traditional boots. Three Brothers RC products, RC care. You want it, they got it, you need it. They are the only game in town that you want to be dealing with. Southpaw Boxing Club. That's right, out of Hilliard, Ohio. Southpaw Boxing Club. These guys, these girls, these men, these women, they've got everything for you all the way up from kids' classes to the adults. We get you, they keep you in shape. And one last thing I'd like to shout out is Handsome Nick Hamrick has got some new merch out there, some figures, some autographs on some 8x10s along with A. Dick Vickers. And at ProWrestlingTees.com, you can check out their new T-shirts. So check out Handsome Nick Hamrick and A. Dick Vickers. You will be satisfied walking around with their gear. People will like you, want to gravitate towards you. Your social status will change. Believe it. With that being said, I'd like to start the podcast if I could. I know you're going to go, what the heck's he talking about? Is there really any news going on in pro wrestling today? Yeah, I think there's a couple things, but you know what? As it pertains to Vince McMahon, I'm not going to get into the lawsuit stuff. I would like to briefly talk about Vince McMahon on another level, though, and that is the evolution of pro wrestling, because his name should be involved in that, along with Jim Crockett Promotions, along with Vern Gagne, along with the Memphis Jerry Lawler, and of course, WCCW in Texas there with the Von Erichs. A lot of, you got the Iron Claw movie that's out there. Jerry Lawler is always waving the flag for Memphis wrestling. Greg Gagne is the last of the Gagnes, of course, talking about AWA. Not a big fan of Greg Gagne. It's hard to believe anything he says. He seems to have always come up with something before anybody else has, yet AWA couldn't hold on to their talent. And then, of course, you got Vince McMahon and David Crockett Promotions, which was connected to the NWA. I know there's the UWF in Mid-South with Bill Watts. You're absolutely right. And, of course, as we know with the evolution of pro wrestling, it all morphed into one big glom, which turned into the WWE. However, with that evolution, Vince McMahon was working so hard to take over at Nationwide, and as Hogan and some other wrestlers have said, getting in out of the smoky bars and pool halls, so to speak, with the cigar smokers and the rowdy crowds, giving it to the families and bringing it nationwide and the production value. At some point, however, that motive changed. And with that motive changing, wrestling changed. And in my opinion, when you have McMahon Sr., and you got the Bruno era to the Backlund era, back to Hogan, and of course, superstar Billy Graham, you can't overlook him in there. You had that certain style of wrestling. Of course, Hogan comes in, and you got the 80s up to, I'm going to say, 90, maybe 91. I know Hogan was there in 92, 93. But I believe once Undertaker was introduced, you could start to see a change in the concept and presentation of wrestlers in the WWF. When you compare that to the NWA, or what then became the WCW. The NWA style, which I thought was excellent and a great balance to the early to mid 80s of the WWF, that went away as well. And so you had that evolution right there. Then you went into the Hart Michaels era. Not much going on, not a lot of draw, bad part of the business, as a lot of people would say. Then it bumped up to Rock and Austin. And then, of course, and I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I'm getting to my point here, which is Vince took Bischoff's plan of reality-based wrestling TV and put a lot of TNA and everything else into it, which a lot of people might argue was his subconscious seeping through right now that we know what we know. And your last round of having a man or woman wrestler to be the face rather than a brand was John Cena. Nowadays, it's just there's no names. It's all just a brand. I don't care what you say. The person closest to being a standalone is Cody Rhodes. Other than Cody Rhodes, everybody else can be replaced. And that's an argument. If you got a question, drop a question in the comments. Let me know what you think. I'd love to have that discussion with you. I think Cody Rhodes is the only standalone. Everybody else is replaceable. They've been let go. They've been brought back. They've got 4 of them just like them that they slide in. My whole point of the evolution of wrestling is, especially with Vince McMahon's personal issues into it, it is now back to where it started again. It used to be made fun of. There was some legitimacy about it. It was accepted. I think it's back to now being made fun of again. A good example of that was the Bill Maher Bob Costas interview. And there's a podcast out there. I forget the gentleman's name. I watched some of it. He was so critical of the whole situation of making fun of Bob Costas and Bill Maher not knowing what they're talking about. Why would they know what they're talking about? Bob Costas, of course, if you know, was the ring announcer in February of '85 for the War to Settle the Score, and he's been somewhat of an advocate for the WWF/WWE. He had that interview with Roddy Piper. He's done a couple with Vince McMahon. I don't really think he was making light of the company in a negative way. He quoted Bobby Heenan. I think he talked about Fred Blassie. Here's the thing, though. He's not in deep as a wrestling fan, so he's going to misquote some things because to him it doesn't matter. Bill Maher could give 2 craps about the WWE and pro wrestling in general. So to him, he does feel he's better than pro wrestling. At one time, he may not have felt that way, or people like him may not have felt that way because it was accepted by mainstream. It isn't anymore. It's just not. It is funny. People do make fun of it. It is back to where it was before Vince McMahon got his hands on it. And I'm not discrediting the NWA and some of the AWA stuff from the 50s and 60s. Neither am I Bruno Sammartino. That stuff wasn't made fun of. It was that once it started to evolve in the late 70s and through the 80s, it got through that stigma. It got through the John Stossel 60-minute documentary piece, and then it became accepted, and people wanted to be a part of it. All you have to do is go back and look at all the WrestleManias and look at all the influence that it had. Now it's opposite of that. Now I know everybody wants to be a part of it, but they're just thrown in to be thrown in to get their little glory. But then they go back and, yeah, it's fake wrestling. And everyone's okay with that. And of course, my biggest issue with that has always been, don't sell a feud to me and then post the 2 guys or the 2 girls out on social media hanging out, getting a drink later. The one good thing about Roman Reigns, I don't see a lot of that with him at all. Cody Rhodes, I don't see too much of him with heels doing that. But once again, we really aren't in a heel face society anymore when it comes to pro wrestling. So Vince McMahon birthed it in his opinion, and he killed it in his opinion. Pro wrestling will not get back to what it was because of what they allowed inside, and that's just the way it is. You can't, as they say, put the toothpaste back in the tube. So Vince was able to be on both ends of that. the rebirth of pro wrestling and the death of pro wrestling. And that's my evolution take on that. I just thought I'd share that with you. That's one of the little things, if I was going to talk about Vince McMahon, I wanted to talk about. And please be wary of these podcast guys that, you know what? That's the problem. Their word is they love ragging on anybody that rags on pro wrestling. They're allowed to rag. People can rag on pro wrestling if they want. Doesn't mean they're right, but that gives them the opportunity. Just like when I'm talking about independent wrestlers, who's good and who's not. That's just my opinion. So with that being said, I just wanted to talk about Vince McMahon and the evolution of a quick little history of the evolution of pro wrestling. Once again, don't forget my sponsors, Jose Sanchez Boots, Southpaw Boxing Club, and Three Brothers RC. And don't forget Handsome Nick Hamrick and A. Dick Vickers have some merchandise out there at ProWrestlingTees.com. Two things that I talked about in the past that I briefly like to touch upon again. I still stand behind my argument that the Gunther title reign is the best title reign going today. It has so much more impact, and effect than the Roman Reigns title reign. I don't know what's going on, meaning I know what's going on, but in there, the booking head of what do we do with The Rock, what do we do with Cody, what do we do with the Bloodline, so on and so forth. I still believe they want Roman Reigns in the top 4 wrestlers of all time title reigns. And to do that, he has to beat Hogan. Once again, I still believe that out there in the culture, it's Hogan bad, everyone else good, no matter what they've done. So they're going to have to figure out how do we break that record and please the people. Sometimes you don't please the people, but in this case, something affected them to the point where, at least to the outsiders, it looks like they're changing their storylines, which we shouldn't even know their storylines to begin with. But once again, that's the difference between modern wrestling and classic wrestling. I still believe, however, that the Gunther title reign is the most legitimate title reign out there, and it actually brings legitimacy to the Intercontinental title, and I hope they build him somewhere to keep that going and to be a major player in what's going on, because I really do think that it's just a really good storyline. I'm just not a big fan of once they realize what they were doing and they keep promoting the whole breaking the record, and people like to make comments now, even inside. I was watching the WrestleMania press conference kickoff, and one of the announcers made a comment, yeah, Roman's 27 title reigns in 3.5 years or whatever it is. So are we burying ourselves, or I don't know what is it that we're doing? What happened to the art of the promo? It's like anybody who has some kind of leverage to make money with the WWE, they sign them, these podcast guys, and then they get to talk about them growing up and loving the business, and then they get to give their opinion like it's written in stone, which segues me to the next piece, into indie wrestling, independent wrestling. I believe that the WWE, AEW, and all points in between, the big ones, I believe they feel they do not need to go out amongst the independent wrestling community anymore with scouts and pick up new talent. I believe AEW is only picking up the friends of friends within the company, or WWE people that have been let go. I believe WWE is only picking up athletes and people from business and celebrity, and they've said the heck with independent wrestling. I still stand behind the fact that Matt Cardona is not an independent wrestler. He just won Indie Wrestler of the Year, I believe. He's not an indie wrestler. I'm not going against what he can do in the ring or whatever that he does. I'm just saying that is not an independent wrestler. I think that it shortchanges who really is an indie wrestler. And once again, I know WWE and some other companies used to send out scouts. The funny thing is, we had a guy on our roster at one point where I worked, where I always talked about how WWE sending out a scout for me today, so I got to have a high-profile match. Of course, we never saw that scout, right? You always have that guy that always happens to know. But one time, I happened to have a friend out in the crowd, and he happened to sit beside a guy who happened to look professional, and the guy kept asking him, well, who do you like? And come to find out, he was a scout. And the interesting thing is, the scout shared with my friend the guys that he was looking at and liked, and it wasn't the guy that said he was being scouted. So nothing ever came of that, and that's okay. It happens. But I just think there's a lot of independent talent out there, and I've said this on my podcast many times that these companies are missing the boat. Even MLW, NWA, AAW. There's a couple down in Texas. If you're seeking out new talent, man, what? I just feel like we're missing the boat here. There's a lot of good indie guys out there, just like there's a lot of bad indie guys. And these guys, most of these indie guys have the history and the culture of pro wrestling, and they can do any type of match you need them to do because they're aware of the culture and the history of that. And I would take a guy over that because you can always put someone in the weight room. You can always help them with certain aspects of their gear, their ring entrance. You can brush them up. Now, there's some things you can't teach. I think promos, you either can talk on the stick or you can't. I think getting in the ring, you can get to a certain point, but there's some guys that just have it. It's just like in any sport, you have the X factor. But there are role players that can, just like in any sport, get the job done and help elevate everyone. And I think there's a lot of guys out there that can do that. And it's a shame that WWE and the other companies, AEW and so on and so forth, aren't scouring this. Now, I know you're going to tell me, well, they do. Now, East Coast, West Coast, okay, I'll give you that. What about the Midwest? Right smack dab, right in the middle. There's a lot of good stuff going on in the Midwest, the Big Ten area, let's say, as well. And the guys that I saw 2-3 years ago are still out there busting their hump, doing great things, not being stagnant, doing what they have to do to promote themselves. And it would not be nice just to see them on an opening match or something to where they get an opportunity because they're going to have, I'm telling you right now, they're going to have qualities and elements and skills that these people coming out of athletic college, people that WWE and AEW is trying to bird dog, they're not going to have. You're trying to hotshot these guys as quick as you can into the lineup, and they're missing stuff. A perfect example, in my opinion, is The Rock's daughter. I don't care. She's been in there 3 or 4 years, and now they're pushing her. I said this before, I'll say it again. When she was first introduced in those matches, I knew 100 girls on the independent circuit that was 10 times better than her. Now she's in a different role. It doesn't bother me. She's insignificant to me, and it's nothing against her personally. I'm not one of those people who are trying to hurt her or go against her. I'm talking about you're giving me a product of professional wrestling, and you're telling me you're going to entertain me, and I'm telling you it's not entertaining. So that is how I view when I dislike something. Is it entertaining to the masses? Is it entertaining to me? Looking at ratings and looking at everything else, you have the same people that are watching it. The product is not growing a fan base because it's a brand, and that's the problem. A brand, I believe, can only go so far. When you put someone in the brand and promote that person with the brand, then I believe you start to grow things. So, just to make myself clear there, I do believe that the independent scene is not being utilized the way it should. Now, talking about that independent scene, you got two ways. Now, this is what I feel could hurt independent guys. They go everywhere. They take any booking they can. So if they get on a roll with a company that's actually using them, and then they get booked to put a bunch of guys who haven't even got 10 minutes in the ring and they got to put them over, just your luck. That's the match that's going to be seen that's going to tank you. I think you got to protect yourself. And this goes back to modern versus traditional wrestling. You either get on a promotion or a card that only books story development, which means if you do it right, you're going to have a long-term success and stability with a company because they're going to use you, get you over, get you into a program, and then you're going to be able to showcase what you can do with different types of talent. Or you're just doing matches. I just need to book you to do this, or we're just doing 6 matches. Has no significance. We're just going to entertain the people. Well, I've been on cards like both, and I can tell you this: the modern wrestling is great out of the gate. But unless a guy knows how to use those spots and transitions, so you're not overindulging and flooding the fans with the same stuff, I would rather take a guy that knows how to body slam, punch, and get his character over. Because if he progresses or she progresses like she's supposed to, then by the time you have your blow off feud and your big match, people are invested and they're paying money. And isn't that what it's about? At the end of the day, for these independent wrestlers and independent promoters, isn't it about putting butts in the seats and making money? I think that's what it's about, right? Because then if they're not making money, how do they put a ring somewhere and how do they get people to come see it? I don't know. They just don't spring up, right? So once again, that's my take on indie. I'm still a big indie fan. I think it has changed over the past 10 years. I still believe there is less quality than more. But once again, I'm a traditional style guy. I'm not a fan of the modern stuff because I don't feel it's long term. If certain indie companies had a TV spot, it wouldn't matter if people were coming because you got eyes on your product and people are going to like what they like and they don't. Once again, look at the big numbers for the big companies and are they moving the needle? Not really. Same thing with some of these podcasts. I'm definitely not moving any numbers, but the guys that were held as these great podcasters, you can only talk about the same thing so many times. What is new in pro wrestling? There's nothing new. Nothing unless it's scandal. It's how can we get these traditional guys to roll on each other in podcasts? It's even getting old where they're taking people that were held in high regard in the past and crucifying them in podcasts and stuff. You can only do that so much. It just, when is originality going to take hold again? So this is my advice out there. I got a couple pieces of advice out there. If you happen to be listening, you want to get into the business, or you're in the business and you're feeling stale, be original. Be original. There's nothing wrong with wearing black and red. But if everybody on the roster is wearing black and or red, I would go with a different color. I myself, I like changing the colors up. I wear black, I wear red, but if I'm wrestling a guy, I try to change my gear up different than what they're wearing because I want to stand out. Be creative if you're going to have entrance music. Please be creative. Number 3, when you're talking about promos, once again, I believe you can either promo or you can't. If you can't, hopefully you got a guy interviewing you, the guy on the stick, that can lead you somewhere, and less is more. How you sell yourself non-verbally, physically, and then when you say what you say means something, that helps you until you can get your feet. Work it out with the guy interviewing you. Don't just do the typical stuff in front of your mother's closet door or outside in front of a fire pit. And I'll tell you something else, especially on the indie scene. I don't think spooky gets over. I don't think being spooky, I'm supposed to believe you're a demon from another world. I don't think that gets over. Because if wrestling's supposed to be real, which we're told it's not anymore, so that factor's taken out of, if I'm wrestling someone who comes crawling out with blood all over their face and gets in the ring with me, I am hitting them with a chair over the head and beating the crap out of them. And then if I get DQ'd, fine. Now I don't have to deal with that creepy guy who's coming from the depths of hell. Once again, fans want to see realism. They want to see good versus evil, and they want to root for someone, even if it is the heel, which, once again, everybody wants to be a heel, but they want to be cheered. So there's your shades of gray, and that is why I believe we're in a rut right now when it comes to an indie wrestling. Also, my last piece, can I just say this? I got to. I know this first episode probably isn't lighting the world on fire, but I just wanted to touch base on some things, kind of get my feet wet again into season 2. I got a lot of things I want to talk about this season, but I just wanted to kind of ease into it. Let me share this with you. Abs do not make the man. Okay? Abs do not a wrestler make. If you think just because you have abs, you're the man or you're the woman, once you get in the ring, those abs don't help much. You may look good on an 8x10 glossy. People want to get their pictures with you. Why do they want to get their pictures with you, right? Are you being sold as TNA as a woman or as a guy? What is it about you? Is it your abs, really? That always kills me. They're more worried about certain parts of their body than figuring out, how am I going to get over tonight? Am I looking at the crowd? Who am I wrestling? That type of stuff. I don't know. Hey, if it was easy as having abs, everybody would have abs, but they don't, right? And they try to. And if you ever notice, and this isn't, hey, if you have abs, you have more than me. I'll tell you that. And this isn't me poking at people with abs. I think it's great that you have abs. It takes a lot to have them. But that doesn't get you over in the ring. At the end of the day, your skill, do you connect with the crowd? Those are the things we want to do. And you got to decide, are you modern or are you traditional? And if so, how are we going to work that on the card tonight to get everybody over? It's about getting everybody over so we can all do business and we can all move on. Once again, respect the past, because at one point in your life, you're going to be a part of it. Hey, Jose Sanchez Boots, thank you. Three Brothers RC, awesome. Southpaw Boxing Club, get in shape. You know what I'm talking about. Sinbad's Gym, thank you for your continued service of helping me stay in the bells of justice in my boots and my gear. I do appreciate it. And finally, Handsome Nick Hamrick and A. Dick Vickers has some gear that you're going to want to check out. I am excited to get season 2 rocking and rolling. I wanted to throw some things out there. I do appreciate if you listen to this all the way. I really do appreciate it. I'll be bringing back the focus matches of the day, where I've got some matches I'm going to play for you, indie and pro wrestling style. I plan to have some guests like I did last season, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things. The whole WrestleMania 18 thing about turning on the volume and taking off the volume, give me a break. I'd love to talk about that. And there's just a lot of things I want to touch upon this season, but we got some time. So what do you say we work it out? We get it into a nice program. We book these things right, and you're either going to love me or hate me, but at the end of the day, someone's getting put over. With that being said, you don't have to go home. You can't stay here. God is good, and I will see you at the matches.